Let me just start off by saying that if you're married, you're never going to win an argument. You may be right, and she may know that you're right. You're not going to win, okay? Even if you prove you're right, you're still going to end up sleeping all alone on the cold couch. So, did you really win? I'll let her continue winning all the fights and thinking that she's right, but I get to sleep in a nice, cozy, warm bed. Now that I consider winning. Anyways, all jokes aside, let's get straight into today's video because we're getting pretty serious. Well, as serious as you can get over articulated action figures. And actually decided to come back around and cover a topic that we kind of already mentioned in a previous video, but we really didn't get into the main talking points. It wasn't like an in-depth look at the figure. And so in today's video, I thought that we would, backtrack and talk a little bit about it. And yes, I am referring to the X-Men 97 made-to-order Apocalypse action figure, which, if I'm not mistaken, is exclusive to Hasbro Pulse. You will submit your pre-order, and then when the figure is ready to ship out, it will ship out. Now, previously, I think with Dragon Man, or one of the first original made-to-order action figures, I made the mistake of assuming that they were going to be, or you were going to be charged at the moment of the project closing, but that is not the case at all. You can actually still cancel your pre-order well after the actual pre-order window has closed. So that means that you're not locked into it, which I should say is one of the better advantages when it comes down to these made-to-order projects compared to like HasLab projects, where HasLab, as soon as the project closes or is fully funded, you will be charged immediately, and then you will be getting the figure within like a year. In this particular circumstance, it's completely different. You will only be getting, or you will only be charged when the figure actually ships out to you. So you're essentially just promising that you're going to purchase the figure, which I'm a little bit more comfortable with. I think most collectors would prefer that format. But then again, a lot of these crowdfunded projects need the funding upfront because in most cases they just can't fund the product themselves. So I think it's a double-edged sword. It just depends on the project. It depends on the figure, the size, the scale, the extra accessories, the fan support, things of that nature. I think all of that plays a huge role in how the particular collectible will be handled. But here in this particular case, you will be paying $120 for an X-Men 97 Apocalypse, and I think this kind of created quite a bit of buzz around the community. Now, granted, this figure is only 12 inches tall compared to some of the previous offerings. We did have Mephisto, who was, I think, much shorter than that. I think he was about like 7 to 8 inches, but he did come with a plethora of different accessories. It came with a highly detailed throne. You had Dragon Man, who, if I'm not mistaken, was about like $85, and that figure was, I think, about 9 to 10 inches, but it was a much beefier figure, just wider. He had the gigantic wings, had a few extra accessories. And then we did have the Sentinels not too long ago that are also based on the X-Men 97 universe. The real question is whether this figure, or I should say how it compares to those particular figures. Granted, it is much shorter than the Sentinel. It is slightly taller than the Dragon Man, but in terms of width and girth, I do feel like the figure has quite a bit of mass. It's not something that people usually talk about when they refer to action figures. They only talk about length or size, but they completely forget to mention the girth and the actual width of the figure, which I definitely feel like plays a huge role. And the articulation is also a huge point of emphasis because the figure is bigger, because there's just way more weight to the plastic. I think the engineering when it comes down to the articulation is a bit more difficult. We saw this be an issue with, for example, the HasLab projects. Whether it was the Galactus or the Sentinel, we saw the legs either not be tight enough or they just couldn't quite hold up to the weight of the actual figure. So that is definitely something that they have to pour way more effort into, and the engineering, I think, is a little bit more complex. So I'm assuming that's why the price point also is a little bit more increased. Let's not forget this figure does come with an insane amount of accessories, different blast effects. It will come with a really big shield, an extra head sculpt, a drill hand, a blade hand, and a blaster. I mean, there are definitely way more features and accessories added to this particular made-to-order action figure compared to some previous ones. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're considering the overall price point. And by the way, these accessories are not small accessories. They're built for a 12-inch action figure, so that shield is just going to be massive. It's probably going to be like 4 to 5 inches alone. The blast effect pieces are also going to be really big. and the drill hand and all of those extra accessories, they just require way more plastic and, you know, way more paint applications and so on and so forth. Look, I'm not trying to make excuses for the figure. I'm just trying to give you all of the factors when considering what the figure should be priced at. Now, it is worth mentioning that even though I personally don't feel like this figure is massively overpriced, like maybe you are overpaying like $15 to $20 for this figure, but there are some prime examples of Hasbro actually giving us some really good collectibles, not nearly as big, not nearly with as much plastic, but still really good solid action figures that are close to that particular scale for much less. You had, for example, the Gamerverse Venom, which I believe was about 10 inches tall. It came with butterfly joints, mid-torso articulation. It just came with everything that you would expect from a normal 1/12 scale Venom. And that figure was still priced at that $60 or $65 price point, somewhere along those lines. So, and by the way, it's only a few inches shorter than the Apocalypse. It didn't include as many accessories. I think it only included like an extra effect piece and then maybe extra hands, if I'm not mistaken. But as I mentioned, still only a couple of inches shorter, probably a slightly thinner frame than the Apocalypse, so there's much less plastic involved. But still, I remember the sculpt work and the paint job on that particular Venom being very intricate and definitely not what we're used to from a normal 1/12 scale action figure or just a regular Marvel Legends action figure at that $25 to $30 price point. So it is definitely worth pointing that out. We did also receive the Hulkbuster figure, which brought brand new engineering. I think that figure was all brand new. It was just massive, a ton of plastic, amazing sculpt work, extra paint apps. There was quite a bit of engineering that went into the figure, and even that was priced at about $60 to $65. So I can definitely see it from a different angle here. I understand why people are confused about the price point, why they're frustrated, and why they feel like they're slightly overpaying for this Apocalypse. The other big point that I wanted to drive home is the source material. Apocalypse 97, we all know the animated series. It's an absolute banger animated series. I think it's probably one of the best comic book based series out there. If you guys haven't watched it, I definitely suggest you guys do so. But I think it just doesn't appeal to a wider audience. They could have easily done something that was just comic book based or just like a more in general look for Apocalypse here. The color palette, the color tone, it's very reminiscent of the animated series. And so I think a lot of people are frustrated about that. Why not give the consumer base something that is a little bit more vague, that can potentially fit into multiple different displays, rather than have that color palette that would only fit with the X-Men 97 universe? Unless you're not really that picky and the colors don't really matter too much to you, I guess you can kind of sneak them into multiple different displays. It kind of reminds me of the Sentinels as well. Like the Sentinels, I think, were a little bit more vague. I think the color palette and the color tones could fit into multiple different displays, whereas I feel like the Apocalypse feels like it just comes straight from the animated series. So I can see why people are frustrated, why they're just losing their minds over this. But at the same time, I can definitely understand it from Hasbro's perspective. They are going out on a limb, making a much bigger collectible, and maybe they're just a little bit scared that if they price it at a more reasonable price point, maybe they're not going to be able to get the profits back that they invested. Because let's not forget, this particular figure will go into production. Like, they're already signing up for it. There's a prototype somewhere out there. It may already be going into production somewhere. Now they only have to be able to calculate how many people are interested in these figures and how many of these they actually have to produce. And that's really what this entire campaign is for. So it's definitely a huge risk, because they could potentially go into production with only a few thousand of these actually being on order. On a side note, and I was going to make this like its own video, but I decided why not, I'll talk about it in today's video. The Dragon Man is actually available right now on Hasbro Pulse for, if I'm not mistaken, like about $100, which is like a $15 markup from the original price point. This, I think, is a huge red flag. It's a huge warning sign to collectors. There are a lot of people out there that are trying to like purchase multiples of this Apocalypse, and I'm not certain exactly what Hasbro is trying to do here. Did they manufacture extra ones? Are these the ones that certain collectors decided to cancel from the time that the window closed up to the time that these were going to ship out? Maybe there were, a few dozen individuals, or maybe like 100 or a couple hundred people that decided to cancel their orders. Are these the ones that are being shopped around? I'm just really confused here, because it almost feels like Hasbro is just using that as an opportunity to create a little bit of FOMO, perhaps, like trying to get people to feel like if they don't purchase the figure, they're going to have to pay quite a bit of a markup later down the road. I'm a little bit confused. Not to mention, I checked the 97 Sentinels, and I think those are being marked up to like about low 200s. I think like 210, 220. If I'm not mistaken, the original price point for these was like 180. So they're marking them up about like $30 to $40 for the late buyers, which just feels like a dirty move, because you're essentially insinuating that if you don't purchase the figure right now at this moment before the window closes, that you will not be able to purchase this figure at retail, which I guess technically is true, because there's that little added like markup from Hasbro, which I'm not really understanding why. Is that just because you came late? Is that like a little fee they're adding on top of the original retail price point? But it's just interesting going forward. As I mentioned, the X-Men 97 Sentinels have not gone up for pre-order. I should mention that, or you can actually add them to your cart. But there is a marked up price, and it does have a little green dot, which means that eventually they're going to be made up available through pre-order. Maybe, I'm not sure, but it doesn't say that the product or that the campaign is fully closed, which is kind of interesting, because if you try to go look at like old HasLab project windows, it usually lets you know like there's no way you can purchase this. The Dragon Man is made available right now $100 with whatever taxes you're going to pay on top of it. The X-Men 97 Sentinel is being marked up to $210. You still can't purchase it. There's no option to actually add it to your cart. But I'm assuming they marked it up for when they actually have these available, the extras, quote unquote, or the cancellations, or whatever the case may be. I think this is going to be the tactic moving forward. They're going to make you think that these are going to sell out and you're never going to see them again. But I think there is going to be a decent amount that they overproduce of this figure. So I'm not sure why they're wording it that way. I'm not sure why they're making you feel like this is the only opportunity that you have to purchase these figures, when in reality that isn't true. They're going to be made available later down the road, once they, all of the pre-orders are fulfilled, once all of the people that purchased prior to that window closing have received their figure, then they're going to make a decent amount available, because Dragon Man has been available now for a few months, which makes me believe that there were quite a few produced. It wasn't like a few dozen or a couple hundred from canceled pre-orders. It makes me believe that they like purposely mass produced or overproduced some of these figures to have some available. They mark them up, they make a little bit extra on the back end. Like I said, I didn't know this initially. This is something that's new to me personally. Maybe this was something that they talked about in one of the live streams and I just completely whiffed on it or missed on it. But originally, my personal understanding of these made to order campaigns was that you pre-order the figure. Once the window closed, you had a 0% chance of picking these figures up. But unfortunately, that's not the case. So just be wary, just be cautious. If worst case scenario, you don't have the funds for it and you want to risk it and wait until that pre-order window pops back up, or wait for those figures that may still be made available once everybody receives their figure, then I guess you could risk it, right? Like worst case scenario, you get the figure a little bit later and you pay like a $30 to $40 markup for most of these figures. In the case of Dragon Man, it's only like $15, and the Sentinels, I think it's like close to about $30, I think, the markup, which isn't really that crazy. Like I said, you're paying that premium because you came in late, but you really didn't miss out. That's really the only, it's kind of like you get that special pricing for a lot of these Kickstarter campaigns where if like you pre-order early, they'll usually offer the collectible for like 15 to 20% off. You get like the early bird special. I think that's what Hasbro is essentially doing here, but I think they should have clarified that from the get-go. As I said, unless I completely whiffed on it and missed on it and I'm the buffoon, let me know down below. I could be wrong on that, but that's just what I remember. That's what my tiny little reptilian brain is telling me. But I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say. Let me know down below in the comment section. Do you guys feel like this figure is actually worth the price point? Do you not feel that? Did you pre-order any of the other made-to-order collectibles so far made available through Hasbro Pulse? Are you having buyer's remorse? Have you canceled any of those pre-orders? I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say. Let me know down below in the comment section. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure to stay tuned. We are uploading on a daily basis, and we absolutely love it. Stay safe out there. Enjoy the hobby, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.